Okay. Time to read.
You finally got it?
Finally got it.
Am I starting from the very tippity top?
The very tippity top.
Are you already recording?
I'm already recording.
You're such a nerd. Cost 9. The cost approach to value, cost estimation. This chapter describes the theory and principles of the cost approach and its application in single property appraisal. Applications in mass appraisal are discussed in Chapter 15, Mass Appraisal. The concept of value, market value, pertains to a measure of worth of a good or thing. That measure of worth can be realized in an open and competitive market in which buyers and sellers are free to meet and interactions of supply and demand are not impeded by coercion, compulsion, or restrictions. The art of valuation is a disciplined procedure that complies with well-defined ground rules that, as a whole, are are contained in an orderly plan of action known as the appraisal process. The appraiser should know and understand the economic ground rules that limit and to a large extent govern the application of the cost as well as other approaches to value. Tax assessors, tax administrators, and fee appraisers should keep in mind that there are government restrictions and legal limitations placed upon property. These restrictions placed upon a property limit the quantity and quality of service as well as the price of the product or service with the intent to set a limit on earnings in relation to invested capital. Moreover, sacrificing factors of production does not necessarily establish value equal to the cost or sacrifice. To establish value, the factors of production must produce goods or services that have utility, are scarce, and are in demand in an economic sense. The degree of utility of a good or service is measured, of course, by either the price obtainable or the income that these goods or services can generate. The economic principle that is the foundation for the cost approach is the principle of substitution, which states that a rational, informed purchaser will pay no more for a property than the cost of acquiring an acceptable substitute with like utility, assuming that no costly delay is encountered in making the substitution. The cost approach to value provides a value indication that is the sum of the estimated land value and the estimated depreciated cost of the building and other improvements. The breakdown into land and building components is important because it creates many issues that are not relevant in the other approaches in which the land is not separated from the improvements. For example, the allocation of external economic obsolescence is measured separately in the cost approach but not in the income capitalization and sales comparison approaches. In the income and sales comparison approaches, external obsolescence is self-measured. For example, the income stream would be reduced for depreciation that is equivalent in the subject property. Likewise, the sale price of the property would reflect the loss in value to depreciation. The cost approach is based on comparison between the cost to develop a property and the market value of the existing property or a similarly developed property. Because the real estate market relates value to cost, the cost approach should reflect market behavior. In modern appraisal theory, appraisers should make careful distinctions between the terms price, cost, and value, and denote these distinctions in the appraisal. The term price refers to the amount of a particular purchaser agrees to pay and a particular seller agrees to accept under the circumstances surrounding their transaction. A price, when finalized, refers to a sale and implies an exchange. While many people use cost and value synonymously, appraisers are required to use more precise definitions. Cost and value are not necessarily synonymous. The term cost is used by appraisers in relation to production, not exchange. Cost may either be an accomplished fact or a current estimate. The cost approach usually works best for newer improvements because construction costs are easier to estimate and there is less depreciation. It is also used for valuing new or proposed construction when the land value is well supported. This approach is especially useful for appraising properties for which sales and income data are scarce. Sales and income data are often difficult to obtain for special purpose, industrial, public utility, and railroad properties. Even when values from the sales and income approaches are used for assessments or appraisals, calculation of the cost approach can provide adequate support. The cost approach is also useful for building additions or renovations, or for parcels in which land value tends to make up a considerable portion of overall property value, such as agricultural properties or high-exposure commercial outparcels. The cost approach can take on greater significance because it is the only approach to value that requires a separate land value. The following formula is the cost approach to value expressed as an equation. V, where V is the market value, is equal to LV, whereas that is land value, plus IV, that's the present value of the improvements. The improvement value can be further broken down into cost, CN, and depreciation, D. The equation would then read V for value, LV for land value, CN for cost, D for depreciation, which V is equal to LV plus CN minus D.
So value equals land value plus replacement cost new less depreciation.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you the other night, that you have to read that formula in parentheses. That CN minus D, theirs is cost new. We refer to it as RCN, and the D is depreciation. So land value plus RCNLD.
I'm just reading the book. That's not in the book.
I know. I'm explaining it. So go ahead.
I don't have to remember this stuff.
Yeah,
you
but
do.
I do.
You do.
Everybody else does. So
I'm reading the book. You should write it in the book.
You're getting paid for this.
You want me to say it, you need to write it in the book.
Okay.
In applying the cost approach, an appraiser must distinguish between the different cost bases. 1. Historical cost. 2. Trended historical cost, sometimes referred to as trended reproduction cost. 3. Reproduction cost. And 4. Replacement cost. Once the cost basis is selected, it must be used consistently throughout the cost approach. The type of property, age of property, marker, and physical condition of the appraised property typically suggest which cost would be the basis of the cost estimation. The appraiser then estimates the cost to construct the existing structure and site improvements, including direct cost, indirect cost, and appropriate entrepreneurial profit or incentive, using one of 4 methods. The 4 cost estimation methods are 1. Quantity survey, 2. Unit in place, 3. Comparative unit, square foot, and 4. Factored historical cost. From the cost estimation, the appraiser must deduct all forms of depreciation by one of 5 methods. The 5 methods are further broken down into direct and indirect methods. The 2 indirect methods of measuring depreciation are sales comparison, market extraction, and capitalization of income. The 3 direct methods of measuring depreciation are the age life, modified age life, and the observed condition. The previously described depreciation methods pertain to single property appraisal. Depreciation development in mass appraisal is derived from comparable sales data, which lends itself to mass appraisal applications of the cost approach. Depreciation tables or percent good tables can be developed by using this method. The degree of success using this approach is contingent on having sufficient sales of various ages and types, since different improvements depreciate at different rates. Finally, the appraiser must subtract the total depreciation from the cost estimation to arrive at the depreciated value of the improvement. To this subtotal, add the depreciated cost of the accessory and site improvements along with the site value to obtain market value by the cost approach. Steps in cost approach. Completing an inspection of the neighborhood, the site, and the improvements to the site and collecting all relevant data should precede the steps required for the cost approach to value. The process for valuing property by the cost approach comprises the following 6 steps. Number 1. Estimate the land site value as if vacant and available for development to its highest and best use. The site value analysis is an appraisal. An appraisal can appear as a separate section or as a subsection of the cost approach. Typically, site value analysis is a separate section when the property being appraised is vacant land or an agricultural property with few improvements. The improvements must be valued in a consistent use with the land. Number 2. Estimate the total cost new of the improvements as of the appraisal date, including direct costs, indirect costs, and entrepreneurial profit or entrepreneurial incentive from market analysis.
Can you do me a favor?
Yes.
When you read a step, can you say, like number 3, can you say the third step in valuing property by the cost approach method, which is up here?
Yeah, I got. Number 3 for picky. The third step for valuing property by the cost approach is to estimate the total amount of depreciation from all causes. This depreciation is broken down into 3 categories: physical deterioration, functional obsolescence, and external or economic obsolescence. The fourth step in valuing property by the cost approach is to subtract the total dollar amount of depreciation from the total cost new of the primary improvements to arrive at the depreciated cost of improvements. The fifth step in valuing property by the cost approach is to estimate the total cost new of any accessory improvements and site improvements. Then, estimate and deduct all depreciation from the total cost new of these improvements. The key to this step is estimating the value that these improvements add to the overall value of the property rather than the cost. The sixth and final step to valuing property by the cost approach is to add the site value to the depreciated cost of the primary improvements, accessory improvements, and site improvements to arrive at a value indication by the cost approach. Figure 9.1 is a flowchart of this process. This chapter concentrates on the estimation of costs new. Chapter 10, the cost approach to value depreciation, considers the estimation of depreciation. In the treatment of cost estimation, consideration is given to improvement analysis and methods of cost estimation.
Okay, read this chapter. Read this chart.
Yeah, we read it the other night.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, this is a good one to read. Okay.
Figure 9.1, market value by the cost approach. Select one of the 4 cost bases. I got excited. Select one of 4 cost bases: reproduction cost, replacement cost, historical cost, or trended historical cost. Then, select one of 4 methods, including all appropriate direct and indirect costs and an appropriate entrepreneurial profit or incentive. Quantity survey, unit in place survey, comparative unit, square foot, factored historical. Then estimate depreciation using one of 5 methods, either direct or indirect, considering all elements of depreciation, physical, functional, and external. Be careful to avoid any double counting of depreciation. Indirect methods include market extraction and capitalization of income. Direct methods are age of life, modified age life, and observed condition.
Oh, direct methods of depreciation. Okay.
Then subtracting depreciation from the cost estimation results in the depreciated value of the improvements, excluding the contributory value of any site improvement. Add the contributory value of any remaining...
Contributory.
You're pretty picky.
Yeah, I know. Well, you were doing that last night too. Contributory value.
You're from Oklahoma. You say SERP.
It is SERP. Okay, go ahead.
Syrup. Add the contributory value of any remaining site improvements. Add back the value of the land site based on the highest and best use of the land as vacant. Appraisal principles and appraisal principles application. Substitution. The principle of substitution is the underlying appraisal principle of the cost approach. This principle affirms that a prudent buyer will pay no more for a property than the cost to acquire a similar site and construct improvements of equivalent desirability. In the cost approach to comparable properties are seen as substitutes for the subject property being appraised. On the effective date of appraisal, the accurate cost of the subject's property improvement along with its site value provides a basis for which similar improvements may be valued. Supply and demand. The principles of supply and demand also affect cost. Shifts in supply and demand affect the increase or decrease of costs. When cost shifts out of proportion to price changes, the cost of the improvement changes commensurate with the shift. The developer's incentive for building improvements is affected directly by the principle of supply and demand. Contribution. The principle of contribution defined is that the value of component of property depends on its contribution to the whole. The principle is important in the cost approach because the various methods of estimating improvement costs are based on the contribution of the various building components of the improvement.